Our next game is Lode Runner Online: The Mad Monk's Revenge, which is nominated by @Bigfoot Golem on Twitter. I think Mr. @Bigfoot Golem originally nominated Lode Runner: The Legend Returns, which was by the same developer. It's basically the same game, but missing a couple features.
It's more or less it's almost the exact same as Advance Wars to Advance Wars 2.
I'd say even more so, because when you start up Lode Runner Online, you're basically playing The Legend Returns, right?
Right. The levels are the same. They just have more after the basic level set. So it's
Right.
like it's one of those expansions that includes the original game basically.
It's kind of like Doom versus Final Doom.
Right, and the big inclusion is obviously it's online. So this one came with the sort of TCP/IP like connectivity, so that you could actually play online with a second player or whatever if you wanted to. I don't know how many people actually did, but that was an option in this one.
I'm sure a lot of people did. I didn't, but
I don't think many of us did, because this one was for Windows only. The Legend Returns has a DOS version, which is much easier to get running.
and a PlayStation version.
Right, which surprisingly did not have online support.
Amazingly, yeah. But it did have a whole extra slate of levels because it was published by Natsume. And in Japan, Lode Runner has a much longer-lived following. And it is considered like a hardcore puzzle game. And therefore, like, they demand real serious challenge, because there's always somebody out there who's like, I played the Hudson Soft games, I played the Irem games, I'm going to play this game, it better be hard.
Right. And
Natsume bringing that serious fun.
the interesting thing about Lode Runner, I think, is in Japan especially, it feels like they don't change Lode Runner very much. Like it's like it's got to just be Lode Runner, and you just get puzzles for Lode Runner, and that's it. Like you just buy more of the same exact game.
Whereas, yeah, I mean, they split up the original Lode Runner 6 ways to Sunday, because they had, like, especially the Irem arcade, the coin-op versions, which were just split up Lode Runner levels. But then they had, like, competitive, like, 2 simultaneous play versions, and they would throw in some of the Lode Runner Championship levels and stuff like that. I mean, the thing about this game, like, if you haven't played Lode Runner, some version of Lode Runner, they're all, for the most part, really good. Even the ports and stuff like that. Like the NES Lode Runner, really good. The Game Boy Lode Runner, pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, they're all pretty good. And
Lode Runner is extremely basic in concept, and to execute it is not difficult as such.
No, it can be done on a Game Boy totally functionally. It can be done on the most of my time has been spent with the Game Boy version of Lode Runner, and like the view field's a little smaller, but even with that, it's a fantastic game.
It worked pretty well on a Texas Instruments graphing calculator.
Mm-hmm.
It's playable easily on that kind of screen, which means like not even like the faux grayscale of just it literally just black and white. The
great thing about Lode Runner is it can show you, like, most of the versions show you the whole screen, but they don't have to show you the whole screen, because it's not really a game about necessarily seeing everything. As long as you can see kind of the chunks of puzzle that you're working on, it's fine.
True, although as the levels get more complicated, it really does help to be able to see the whole screen.
It definitely helps. It's more playable if you can see the screen, but it's not mandatory, which is why it can work on a smaller.
Yeah, so like honestly, that was the jump for me. Is like most of my time has been spent with that Game Boy version. So when I first booted up The Legend Returns, I was like, "Holy shit!" Like seeing this whole screen opens this game wide open.
I mean, I don't believe anyone's going to nominate in the near future the original Lode Runner as an Apple II game. It was ported to just about everything, as we said. It's designed by the late great Doug Smith. I'm actually acquaintances with Mr. Smith's daughter on Twitter. She's been lobbying hard for Lode Runner's inclusion in the Video Game Hall of Fame at the Strong Museum in New York, and I definitely support that. Every time they do a nomination thing, please nominate Lode Runner. It is the original Lode Runner, just in terms of innovation in gameplay, and it had a level editor. I believe it's the first game that had a level editor, as far as I know.
It definitely one of those like very, very early games that had a feature. So even if it wasn't the very first one, everyone was like, "Oh, it has a level editor." Like, that
Yeah, I mean, it was the first. Yeah, it's the first game anyone remembers with a level editor, if not the first. I'm guessing it was probably the first.
Yeah,
like, unless
it did
you
it the
count,
loudest and probably
Yeah.
the best too. Like,
for sure.
Well, because all right, so
like,
Lode Runner is like, just quickly to understand why it works so simply and it works well with
Yeah.
the level editor. Or you basically, it's a 2D side-scrolling game where you play as, I guess you titular Lode Runner. Like, it doesn't really in Legend of Returns you're not called the Lode Runner, but I think you're the Lode Runner in most of the games. Like, that's just, you're just the Lode Runner. So what you do is you run around a sort of labyrinth that's 2D, that you climb up ladders and you collect coins or gold or treasure or something, and you're constantly being pursued by like menacing creatures. I think they're usually just like people that sort of chase you. I think they were bombermen at one
the
point.
Mad Monks.
monks,
Yeah.
man.
I mean, well, they're mad monks in the game that we're talking about, but they're not
Or
always
in
monks.
the Broderbund canon, they are the bunglings. As in
Oh,
the bunglings
fucking
from
right.
Rays
That
on
is
Bun-
just
Rays
such
on
a
Yeah.
Bay.
dubious word. I mean, I
You don't want the bunglings to catch you. That's
They're
like,
not
I don't know
the
about this.
buggerlings. They're the bunglings.
I mean,
not-
bungling sounds like something Cal would be deeply offended by. So
I hate to make it bawdy, but I call them the
Bungling is probably like Australia's like national animal, right?
I call them the bungholings to be
Yeah, like, that's what it
derisive.
sounds. Yeah.
It's yeah,
But okay, so you
Yeah,
catch the but your main method of sort of traversal is not just walking around. You have the ability to evaporate ground by shooting. It's usually to your left or your right, and it's usually separate buttons. I think it's some ports,
Almost
not for this
always
game,
it's
but yeah, it's
different
supposed to
buttons,
be.
Yeah.
You can fire independently of the direction you're facing, and that temporarily evaporates ground, and you can sort of dig holes by evaporating strategically certain chunks of ground so you can fall through and collect more treasure. And also enemies can get caught in the ground, and if it closes up on them, then they die and are respawned.
They respawn.
And just a
right.
little extra track in this one, at least. I don't know if it's in the very, very, very first version, but in this one, they can collect treasure, and you have to trap them in order to.
Yeah, they can collect
them
treasure in the original. In fact, many stages of the original, and especially in Championship Lode Runner, the pseudo kind of quasi sequel that's fan made levels using the level editor, you have to have them collect treasure, or else you can't.
Yeah, I
finish a lot
thought
of
that was the
stages.
case. I didn't want to assume. Yeah, so that's like it. Like, that's the gist of Lode Runner. Like, there's not at its basic level. That's Lode Runner,
If you
and it gets.
don't understand Lode Runner and you're listening to this show and you like this show, you owe it to yourself and your children and your children's children to play Lode Runner. You don't really. You have to play it.
yeah,
And you don't even have to
can't-
play that much of it. You can play like 5 levels, and you're like, okay.
But
I
you'll be
understand
playing
Lode Runner.
several hours of it.
sure.
Once you
But,
get
like,
into
honest
it,
to God, it's like Pac-Man level, like, kind of thing.
What I
I'd
really
say
like
more
about
so.
Lode Runner compared to Pac-Man is Lode Runner feels like you are in control of what you are doing. Pac-Man, it always kind of feels, until unless you cheat and you look online and someone's like, this is how the ghosts work, and then they go into like this huge detailed thing. In Lode Runner, it feels like you have control over the game, and you are like, if you make a mistake in Lode Runner, you can die. That's how Lode Runner
right.
works.
Like,
in
Pac-Man's
Pac-Man
more
and stuff,
exhilarating, and like
yeah,
Lode Runner's a lot
Pac-Man's
more
like,
of a
oh god,
contemplative
is he going to
experience.
turn before he
Yeah.
gets you? Whereas in this one, you're like, oh crap, the guy's coming at me. I have to dodge. I have to shoot the ground. I have to do something. I have to solve this puzzle.
Right.
And it is a puzzle, which is interesting about it.
it's a puzzle game, but Pac-Man is a good comparison because it is an AI-based puzzle game in a lot of ways, especially in the more advanced levels on any
Right.
version of the game.
So
You
a lot
have
of
to
the
understand
puzzles-
what and this is really true in the Legend Returns / online, is that you have to understand, and you will understand if you play the game, you have to understand what the enemies will do, how they're going to react to what you do, because that's how you move them around the screen. You have to trap them and stuff like that. A lot of it involves ladders, and you go up a ladder, and their first priority as a very simple AI is going to be match your level.
Yes, they don't follow you in the most logical human sense.
No.
They're not trying to track you necessarily. They are trying to box you in, and it can get very complicated how they sort of
And
move
this is
around.
to the credit of Lode Runner Legend Returns, Lode Runner Online, which said it didn't upgrade the AI of the enemies. It rather would just build new puzzles and stages based around that AI, which is what the original Lode Runner did.
Well, that's what's really important, because it's what sort of makes this more of a it makes Lode Runner as a game like a core sort of game. It's not trying to outsmart the player. It's trying to get the player to outsmart it, I guess. Like, it's a puzzle game. That's what makes it a puzzle, is they're just like a piece of the game's puzzle. What they add in Lode Runner Returns and Online, and I'm not quite sure how much this is in the previous titles, they add a lot of like power-ups and things that you can get that you need to use additionally to the Lode Runner's basic moveset in order to get through the stages.
Right. There's items you can grab, like keys to unlock doors. There are bombs you can grab, which actually adds a lot to the gameplay. There are different tiles, like sticky floors, which also adds a lot to the gameplay.
And look really cool when your Lode Runners, or what is your guy like? Something Peril, I think, is Jake Peril. Your name is Jake Peril in Legend Returns. That's your name.
Yeah.
Isn't there a player 2 that also has a pretty awesome name?
I believe it is P2. Or, no, wait, Scorpion.
He actually does have a cool name, but I can't remember.
Bill Reiser.
It's something dangerous, or we're getting information here. It's Wes Reckless, which is like
Reckless.
That's
reckless. He's reckless.
Nice.
Yeah, don't trust this guy. This is why Jake Peril is P1. You just can't trust Wes Reckless. He's just gonna
reminds me of my favorite G.I. Joe, which was Will Riskett.
There's lots of extra ground tiles, and Online adds some extra stuff like tiles that vanish and reappear, and that's really like dangerous. And this game really works if you played like tons of other Lode Runner games. This game is like, okay, but now there's some more stuff to contend with.
Right.
But also for people who haven't played Lode Runner before, but maybe if you don't like Lode Runner in the sense that you're like, oh, I like the idea, but there's not enough stuff happening. This game adds a lot of stuff.
This game's level design is solid enough that if you haven't played the original Lode Runner, go ahead and play Lode Runner Legend Returns or Lode Runner Online. You're going to get the same basic experience out of it. All it does is just add some more stuff so that the later levels are... It basically just makes the levels progress a little bit more... I don't want to say fairly, but a little bit more gradually is the progression.
Well, it's the levels are very well presented because it doesn't dump all the stuff on you at once. Thank goodness.
There's a nice progression to the campaign, as it were, of the game in the base one. And then Lode Runner Online is kind of a nice preview of coming attractions for something like Super Mario Maker, where it's like, here's this existing concept and you know it very well. And if you are buying a Lode Runner game when this came out, you were probably somewhat familiar with old Lode Runner. But also here's this ability to make and share levels in a way that makes this easier and share this experience with people. Hey, you've already mastered this experience. Now make more of it.
Right.
And that's probably the first Lode Runner that you could reasonably share levels, because you could share them on the internet if you happen to have an internet connection in 92, 93, or whenever these ones sort of snuck out. It might have been 94, 95, I think, was these two. But, if you had a net connection, you could actually download levels and I guess go to user groups for Lode Runner and get levels from each other. So
right.
That was really cool.
The game had a pretty long life in terms of whatever version of the game you had, you'd be able to find fan levels. And also don't forget, Championship Edition was basically the best of the best fan levels selected by the guy who made the game and understood it the best and put out a sequel that was nothing but those levels. It was the final Doom, to use that analogy.
So this one is episode. It's almost like a reboot in its way, this one.
It is, but it really, the thing about Lode Runner is there is no version of the game that changes as much as this game does.
Yeah.
That I know
and
of.
even this doesn't change that much.
And it doesn't. It really, but the changes it makes are great. It's got the sticky floors, which slow down you, but also slow down your enemies. It's got the bombs, which blow up more than one chunk of floor, but also can blow you up or blow up your enemies. And it's got the keys, which it doesn't really do that much with, in my opinion. But also, if you can build some really complicated level designs out of it. You can
Yeah,
share
like,
the level designs.
the maps can be very large in this one. Interestingly, I believe they can be larger than one of the more recent reboots of the game, which was like the Xbox 360 or whatever game. There's some recent-ish Lode Runner console release. I think this one, other than graphically, this one blows it out of the water in terms of features. It just doesn't have as much like sheer content and interesting changes to it to sort of.
It's true. Like I hesitate. My only thing about it is I hesitate to call it the best version of Lode Runner because I feel like the game as a concept, because of the way it progresses up, like it builds the player's knowledge and kind of designs the levels based around what you will learn about how you. There's a lot you can do in this game. In the original Lode Runner, like in the very first Lode Runner, there's a lot you can do with it, which is why it could have like 130 some levels. But it builds on that, and this game doesn't.
This game, yeah, like it's got a lot of gimmicks, so it has to use its own gimmicks. Like it wants to
does a very good job, and they're good gimmicks, and it's fun. It's kind of like a, I would say it's like a Galaga versus Space Invaders kind of dilemma, where you're like, well, there would be no Galaga without Space Invaders, but Galaga does everything Space Invaders does plus a lot more. And I mean,
well,
I guess
I do think like this sort of particular style of Lode Runner would be much more approachable to a more modern gamer because, old Lode Runner is certainly going to feel a little old. It's like it's a very basic experience, and whether that works for you or not, like it could be too basic for some people. I do think the original Lode Runner, like, it is a bit dry in places if you're not into what exactly.
If you don't like that kind of game, you're probably not going to like Lode Runner Online. But
I haven't really spoken much for this, and I did want to jump on the train to say that I think Lode Runner is really impressive and really fantastic old school game, but I really cannot think of a lot to say about it, for better or worse. It is what you get. It really is so blood simple. I mean, I think that works. Well,
it's a Tetris level game.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
In terms of like what it does with what it had, I mean, even more so than Tetris, because Tetris is the marvel of Tetris is that it is so incredibly simple, but the gameplay is so, it's not deep. You couldn't say Tetris has deep gameplay. It's more like the challenge is so natural, like it's so.
Hey,
the
do you know what the
thing
challenge is going to be?
Like virtually everything that has been done to Tetris since original Tetris has made it worse. Like
true. Whereas with Lode Runner Online, it does make the game better. I mean, my only thing would be that I think the level design is not quite as good as the original, 100 plus levels of Lode Runner, but it's pretty close. And
well, the Lode Runner Returns, in the sense that it's called the Legend Returns, there's obviously some sort of assumption that you're going to have played Lode Runner. It's clearly, they're like, we're not going to bother with the basic Lode Runner.
No, I mean, and there's so many different ways to play the original Lode Runner levels that it almost doesn't matter. Like, it would make this game worse if it just recycled those levels. So I'm glad it doesn't. And its levels are good.
But is it, in terms of levels, where do we rank it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would say I would put it below what, if hypothetically, if the original Lode Runner were on the list, I would put it below that just because it is very much riding on the coattails.
I probably wouldn't put it below it, but thankfully it's not here, so we don't have to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like, it's a great game. I mean, I'll say, I don't know whether all the versions of the game do this, but if you play the PlayStation version, it actually, the starting video, as PlayStation games tended to have, was just an interview with Doug Smith explaining how he made the original Lode Runner. I mean, it is a labor of love.
I don't think there's a video in the PC release. I don't think there's a video. I
may look up that PlayStation version just for that.
Doug Smith literally just died not that long ago. He was not that old. And it really is a shame. I mean, he just what he contributed with one game is incredible, and also just he sounds like a great guy. Great. I mean, I got to put this game pretty high on the list, to be honest. It's really hard. I would put it, like I said, I would put it below Doom, above Earthbound, and
I was thinking at the very least better than Wario Land 4.
Yeah, I would say that too. I mean, I would put it. I'm putting it above, but I mean, I gotta put it at least at the very least, Earthbound, between Earthbound and Bionic Commando. I mean, this game is fantastic. I've been playing this game on I've been playing the PlayStation version of the game and just having a great time. I meant to switch from it to Advance Wars 2 to be more prepared for that one, but I was so addicted to Lode Runner online.
I did feel like
get over it.
Lode Runner definitely ate a lot of the other game's sort of time to its credit, and also its detriment. Like frustrating that it's like I just want to play more Lode Runner, don't I? The thing about Lode Runner, I would say, is that you can tell it's a good game in many ways because it hasn't changed. Like it doesn't need to. It's they keep just like it's like every 5 or 10 years or whatever. They're just like there's another Lode Runner. It's basically the same game, but you buy it and play it.
As you say that, I would be super curious to see something like a Championship Edition DX kind of thing, like someone take Lode Runner and just like
it'd be great
really
to see like an interesting like take on the Lode Runner concept, because that's like the only thing I don't think that we get that often is anything that's big different Lode Runner, but that's not important.
This is the best iteration on Lode Runner that I know of. I know there's a Lode Runner 3D that Doug Smith probably contributed more to, but I haven't played enough of it to really have an opinion.
This one's great. Like there's no doubt this is fantastic.
It's hard to argue with this one. Especially because I guarantee you can find like level packs and stuff out there that will have all the original levels on it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this game basically does contain the original 2 Lode Runner games. So,
like, it easily could. You could remake every level from the original games if you wanted to.
And I guarantee you somebody has.
Yeah, it's almost
Tanga, we haven't really heard your opinion.
Yeah, I really wish I had more to say, but you guys cover everything I would have, and I think it deserves to be that high. I think you've all made a fantastic case for it. It's excellent. It's the best, arguably the best incarnation of a classic series. And
so would you put it above or below Earthbound? I guess is where we are.
Well, I am biased towards Earthbound, so I'm not sure you should ask me for that.
I'll say this about Earthbound. As much as I love that game, and I love it, I would play Earthbound maybe one more time in my life. I'm not going to spend that much more time on it. Whereas Lode Runner Online, as soon as enough time has passed where I've forgotten how to solve some of the levels, I would play it again.
You know what?
And it's the same thing with Super Mario Maker. They're, assuming people are still making content for it, and they probably are, there's never going to stop being more Lode Runner for you. Like it's perpetual. It is literally timeless.
That's a good point. As much as I do love Earthbound, you can't give a level editor to a game like that. And even without the editor, Legend Returns just has like 14 million stages in it. So
Legend Returns has the level editor too. Even the PlayStation version has the level editor. Yeah. So it's there. But you're right.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just a lot to it, and it is fun just about every time you go back to it. And it just, notches up the difficulty so very gradually throughout its, 500 course main game that it's the sort of game that if you were stuck on a desert island with, you could potentially play it until you get rescued or die of starvation, and maybe not even beat it.
It's a game that is confident enough in its value and replayability that it lets the player from the very beginning just skip stages.
That's usually a very good sign.
It does not care. It's like, no, you can skip stages all you want. Like, if you don't like the stage, don't play it. There's a bunch more, and they're all great.
I mean, I've got no problem here. Like, if you want to put it above Earthbound, then put it above Earthbound. It's like, I don't think people are gonna the only people that'll argue against Lode Runner is people that just, for whatever reason, they just don't like it. Like, that's the only issue I have with Lode Runner, is that I know some people, they're just not going to like it. And it'll just be like something about the mechanics or something about it. Yeah. They just won't like it. And I'm not ranking this for them, but I'm just like, I get it. If you don't like Lode Runner, you don't like Lode Runner. But for most people, it's going to be like, this is great. This is really solid.
Like games, if you like games and you like to be challenged and you like, you like games that build on their mechanics steadily, this is probably the version of Lode Runner to play, and you got to play Lode Runner.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. So it's going right below Earthbound, right above Bionic Commando, and we are done with this recording.
I do want to say, before you shut off the recording, there is a current person who's remaking Mad Monk's Revenge for modern PCs. He doesn't have any permission to do this, but it's called Mad Monk's Rewrite. And if you'd like to play this game in the easiest way possible, because I don't think they sell it on GOG either, check out Mad Monk's Rewrite, because it's pretty close to perfect, and it has everything you'd want, and it runs on your modern Windows. I think it runs on Windows 10, so check it out. That's pretty cool.